talk about this more recent development in virtue epistemology. Virtue epistemology has been around since the 1980s, so it's been around for a few decades. For the first 2 or 3 decades of its existence, virtue epistemology was framed around this debate about the nature of intellectual virtue. Like there was one camp that was saying intellectual virtue is structured like powers or faculties, and then there's another camp that said that intellectual virtues are a lot closer or almost exactly the same as moral virtues like courage and generosity. Now, there's already an explanation of that in the module, in the study guide, and in the other recording that's been made available to you under this module. So, I'll move to this later development. So, nandito na tayo sa puntong ito na hindi na mahalaga yung debate na yon kasi ngayon meron na ngang pagkakasundo na itong debate sa pagitan ng reliabilist at responsibilist nagbunga lang ng pagkakasundo na walang mananalo sa kanila dahil pareho silang tama. There is no single structure to intellectual virtue, and intellectual virtue is a diverse collection of human capacities that we are interested in as we move towards gaining the ends or the goal of epistemology, which is to gain epistemic goods. And this includes, epistemic goods include knowledge, propositional knowledge, that is propositional knowledge, knowledge by acquaintance, and understanding. So itong virtue anti-theory, ibang-iba yung direction nito. Merong dalawang bagay dito, yung dalawang unang bullet points sa slide na ito. Lorraine Coade's approach was already there, even when philosophers were still preoccupied with the debate between reliabilists and responsibilists. And she was saying that there's a central topic that we must all focus on, which is epistemic responsibility, right? But this approach of hers can be considered a form of anti-theory because she denies that it's possible to develop a systematic theory, a systematic epistemological theory from this point. Meron pang isang anti-theory o baka mas akma na tawaging alternative virtue epistemology. Itong larawan dito sa slide na ito ay ang cover ng libro ni Miranda Fricker. So Miranda Fricker is very famous for starting this conversation around this phrase, epistemic injustice. So epistemic injustice refers to forms of injustice that are specifically relevant to knowing and that are not reducible, that are not completely reducible to political and social injustice. Although, of course, epistemic injustice is still related to political and social injustice. Halimbawa, dito sa usapin ng epistemic injustice, kinikilala na may mga testimonya ang mga tao na hindi binibigyang halaga. So there are people coming from certain backgrounds or who have certain qualities who are not believed when they say certain things, when they talk about their beliefs, even if they present justification for those beliefs, they are not believed. And these people include people from countries that have been colonized. Halimbawa sa Pilipinas, nung dumating yung mga Kastila, may mga sinasabi yung mga taga rito sa atin, mga Indio na tinatawag ng Kastila na hindi dapat nagtatrabaho ng mga 12:00 ng tanghali, hindi lumalabas. Tapos kasi may akusasyon na sinasabi ng mga tao yun kasi tamad sila, pero kasi hindi naunawaan ng mga taga-Europa na iba yung init. Lalo na sa buwan ng Abril, Marso hanggang Mayo, tapos mga Hunyo, mainit pa rin. So that's one example. So people that were perceived as lesser races, and sometimes even today, indigenous peoples are not recognized for what they know. They have a certain wisdom they have a certain understanding of how to live in the world and how to take care of the environment, but because they don't have advanced scientific degrees and they don't communicate that wisdom in a certain way, their testimony is given less weight. Pwede rin pag-usapan dito sa epistemic injustice yung mga biktima at saka yung mga testigo na hindi pinaniniwalaan. Halimbawa, napakatagal, may mga bata na nagsabi na naabuso sila sa simbahan Katoliko, halimbawa, napakatagal na walang naniwala. So this is a kind of phenomenon that people are now studying, and we will look at it a bit more when we study social epistemology. But Fricker's approach to epistemic injustice is related to virtue epistemology, because some of the solutions to epistemic injustice that she discusses is virtue theoretic. So for instance, sinasabi niya, kailangan kasi magkaroon tayo ng galing tungkol sa pagkilatis ng sinasabi ng testigo, na hindi natin basta binabaliwala kahit na ang dating sa atin, parang hindi natin siya pinaniniwalaan. So testimonial justice is a virtue as far as Fricker is concerned. Okay, now for this module, our focus is the kind of virtue epistemology developed by Robert C. Roberts and J. Wood. So sa kanila nanggaling mismo itong term na alternative virtue epistemology, kasi nga matagal na hindi sila interesado. Una, hindi sila sumali dun sa debate sa pagitan ng responsibilist at reliabilist. Una yon. Pero ikalawa, hindi interesado sina Roberts and Wood doon sa mga traditional problems of epistemology. What are the traditional problems of epistemology? So we have been discussing them. The traditional problems of epistemology include skepticism, Gettier cases, and the definition of knowledge. Sabi ni Roberts and Wood, hindi yan ang mahalaga. Kailangan natin pag-usapan ng intellectual virtue, pero hindi para gumawa ng mas malinis at mas interesanteng definition of knowledge, solusyonan ang mga Gettier problems, at sagutin ang mga skeptic. So para saan? At saka bakit alternative? So ito yung sagot. Ito yung sagot ni Roberts and Wood. Ito yung nasa, I think this is from the introduction or the first chapter of their book. So I will read it. And they are proposing this regulative approach. So they say, regulative epistemology does not aim to produce a theory of knowledge. Instead, it tries to generate guidance for epistemic practice, how we ought to conduct our understandings, what we ought to do by way of forming beliefs. Regulative epistemology is a response to perceived deficiencies in people's epistemic conduct, and thus is strongly practical and social, rather than an interesting theoretical challenge for philosophy professors and smart students. This kind of epistemology aims to change the world. According to Walter Storff, Locke's regulative epistemology was a response to the social intellectual crisis created by the breakup of medieval Christendom's intellectual consensus. So, mayroon silang pinagkukuhanan kay John Locke, nila kinuha itong phrase na itong regulative epistemology. Pero interesante itong huling sinabi kasi when the medieval period ended, there was a collapse in the kind of hegemony and a kind of hold on knowledge that happened. I was controlled by the church and the church's relation to political authorities. Ngayon, hindi ganun yung pinag-uusapan natin eh. Ang nakikita natin kasi ngayon, doon sa napaka bukang bibig ng mga tao, yung problema tungkol sa fake news, tungkol sa disinformation and misinformation. Ang nangyari sa atin ay ang breakdown ng what's affecting our belief-forming practices is the breakdown of the old information ecosystem. Before the proliferation of social media, the main source of information was news outlets, mainstream media. Marami ring mga problema sa mainstream media, pero ang mainstream media kasi, una, regulated sila. May mga sinusunod na patakaran na ipinapato ng mga gobyerno at saka international organizations sa mga journalist. Pero bukod pa doon, meron kasing pananagutan yung mga journalists sa ibinabalita nila. Pag may if one specific journalist or one specific media outlet relays a piece of information that turns out to be false, kailangan nilang harapin na ginawa nila yon and to take responsibility for that. Social media is now the main source of information for most people about what's going on in the world. Kung mas mainit ba bukas kaysa ngayon, kung babagyo ba sa susunod na linggo, kung ano bang na nangyayari sa West Philippine Sea, hindi na sa balita na napakinggan sa radyo o nababasa sa dyaryo ang pangunahing pinagkukuhanan. Ang pinagkukuhanan yung social media na largely unregulated, there is no responsibility, at saka pag may mali doon, parang walang mananagot. Hindi mananagot yung, kasi pagka halimbawa may isang nagbabalita sa tayo ng halimbawa ng international news outlet. Halimbawa may lumabas sa Reuters na maling balita. Yung mismong journalist, mananagot siya. Yung mismong Reuters na mismong plataforma kung saan lumabas yung balitang yon, mananagot din yon. Kailangan silang mag-imbestiga kung ba't nangyari, kailangan silang mag-apologize, at saka kailangan nilang gumawa ng paraan para hindi na mangyari yung ganun. Pero ngayon kasi, pagka may maling balita na lumabas sa Facebook o sa Twitter, sa TikTok o kung saan mang social media, hindi masyadong malinaw na may pananagutan yung taong nag-post ng isang bagay na hindi naman totoo. Kasi pa niya sabihin, nagkamali lang naman ako. O, tao lang naman, sinasabi. At lalong-lalo na, walang pananagutan yung mismong plataforma kung saan lumabas yung mga kamalian na ganun. Kahit natalamak at sistematiko pa yung pagkalat ng maling impormasyon doon sa mga platapormang yon. So, why am I talking about that? I'm talking about that to highlight the need for a regulative approach. So, if something collapses and we're in the middle of a crisis that's related to knowledge, to belief, to getting at the truth, we need a kind of philosophical approach that is directed towards practice. How should we conduct our understanding now? How should we form our beliefs now? So ito ang interest ni Robertson Wood. Kaya nga, dito natin makikita yung kanilang, hindi natin makikita kung ano yung kinalaman ng pinili nilang lapit dito sa virtue epistemology na may kinalaman sa mga bagay na kinaharap natin ngayon. Okay. So they have a different approach to intellectual virtue, and they want to turn their backs on traditional epistemological problems. Medyo ganito na rin yung magiging lapit natin sa kurso natin magsimula sa linggong ito. Siyempre, sa buong kurso, hindi naman natin tinalikuran ng tuloy-tuloy yung traditional epistemological problems. Kaya nga meron tayong modules 0 to 6 na as far as we're concerned, traditional epistemological problems yon, kasi hindi naman pwede na wala tayong kaalam-alam kung ano yung mga bagay na yon. Pero ngayon, we take this alternative path, and we have seen this interest in the alternative approach, and one very important aspect of the alternative approach is to develop accounts of individual intellectual virtues for action guiding purposes. Itong action guiding purpose, nag-aaral tayo ng epistemolohiya, nag-aaral tayo tungkol sa belief, truth, justification, para magkaroon tayo ng gabay sa pagkilos. Gabay sa pagkilos patungkol sa kung anong dapat paniwalaan at kung paano tumakbo yung sistema ng pagkolekta natin, kung alin yung paniniwalaan at saka ano yung mga bagay na aalamin. Halimbawa, how does open-mindedness work? So this is a specific intellectual virtue that we will discuss, and how do we practice this in the face of, for instance, ito mahalagang tanong, tatalakayan natin sa mga susunod na linggo. Una, on the face of it, if you look if you think about open-mindedness, you think, okay, it's good to be open-minded. Maganda maging bukas ang isip na pinakikinggan mo kung ano yung mga bago, mga kakaiba, mga medyo ayaw mong paniwalaan na naririnig o nababasa mo. But on the other hand, this is open-mindedness something that makes you susceptible to conspiracy theorists and agents of disinformation? Kasi baka naman masyadong, ibig sabihin ng open-minded, pinapakinggan mo yung conspiracy theory, pinapakinggan mo lahat. So papakinggan mo yung investigative journalist na talaga namang sinunod yung mga napaka-rigorous na proseso ng pag-iimbestiga. Tapos kasing bukas ka doon sa mga conspiracy theorists na ibang-iba yung sinasabi at saka walang accountability at saka walang rigor at all. How does that work? So these are very concrete questions that we want answers to, not just because we are interested in philosophy, but we are of course interested in philosophy, but we are interested in better practice. So yun. So, nabanggit ko na kanina ito, yung sinabi yung tungkol sa trabaho ni Miranda Fricker, yung sa mga isinulat ni Miranda Fricker. So, other virtue epistemologists focus on the relevance of intellectual virtues for addressing structural problems such as epistemic injustice. Okay, so kanina binanggit ko yung particular na uri ng epistemic injustice, the testimonial injustice. May mga testigo, biktima ng mga kawalang katarungan sa lipunan na hindi pinakikinggan. Meron din naman sinatawag na hermeneutical injustice. Ang ibig sabihin yan, yung mga paraan ng pag-iisip at yung mga konsepto ng mga taong hindi pinapakinggan, hindi rin tinatanggap. Kaya merong nangyayaring silencing kasi hindi nila mapag-usapan kung ano yung karanasan nila at saka yung mga isyong malapit sa karanasan nila. Kasi nga, yung mga paraan ng pag-iisip na meron sila, hindi pinakinggan, hindi kinikilala, o kaya itinatakwil at saka hindi tinatanggap sa mainstream discourse. So, for instance, here one question is, how can we be intellectually virtuous in communities where certain testimonies or interpretative approaches are given less credibility? How do we approach that? So that's a very practical question. There's a theoretical side to it, to be sure, but the practical part of it is very clear. So ito yung matingkad na matingkad sa alternative virtue epistemology. Okay, so move on na tayo dito sa kung ano yung virtue, the concept of virtue in this particular form of virtue epistemology. So in this slide, I have two columns. So dito muna tayo sa first column. So you see my cursor moving around the first column. So in the first column, I have the characteristics of virtue that are common in moral virtue and intellectual virtue. So, virtue is an acquired excellence of the soul. So, kagaya na sinabi ko sa inyo, ang mas magandang pagsasalin sa salitang sa katagang erete ay excellence o galing, at ito ay galing na pinagsusumikapang makamit na maging bahagi ng kung sino yung taong yon. So this the soul in Greek, the word that Aristotle uses is that again is mistranslated to English as soul through the Latin anima. Yung salita sa Griego nito ay psyche, and it's closer to psyche or the psychology of the individual agent. Kasi itong virtue, lalo na sa intellectual virtue, napakahalagang sabihin na ang intellectual virtue ay hindi IQ, hindi natural intelligence, hindi giftedness, kasi nga acquired excellence. Di ba? Galing na sinikap ng mismong taong meron ng galing na yon na maging ganong klaseng tao siya. So, pagka pinag-uusapan natin yung galing na ganon sa larangan ng etika, halimbawa, matapang yung tao na yon o makatarungan siya, pinagsumikapan niya na yung mga psychological process sa kalooban niya, yung mga nararamdaman niya, yung mga iniisip niya, at yung mga ikinikilos niya, patungo doon sa, matapang siya, hindi siya nagpapadala sa takot. Natutugunan niya ng maayos yung takot, kung saan parang yung takot ay parang point of information, because it tells her something important about danger, but also she makes a judgment about whether the danger is real, about whether the danger is something that should be risked because there's something important at stake, etc. So for birth moral and epistemic virtue, dito matatawag natin din yung intellectual courage. So it's also about managing fear, but this time it's not for the sake of, let's say, fighting against injustice or against oppressors, but this time it is daring to obtain information even if there's a threat to oneself, or even intellectual courage can mean exploring or investigating topics that are not fashionable or not very safe to investigate. So, virtues and vices are enduring qualities of the person dahil na rin hindi simple na makuha o makamit itong galing na ito. Masasabi lang natin na matapang ang isang tao kung bahagi ng kung sino siya, yung katangian na yon, yung tapang mismo, bahagi nung pagkatao niya. So ito ang ibig sabihin nitong virtues and vices are enduring qualities of the person. Bahagi na yan ng kung paano siya mamuhay sa mundo, paano siya tumagon sa ibang tao, kung paano siya tumagon sa mga pangyayari sa buhay niya. Virtue involves a characteristic motivation to produce a certain desired end. So this is going to be connected to the discussion of emotions that I'm going to go through in a few minutes. But when we talk about motivation in virtue, we are talking about desire. And under the Aristotelian framework, desire is a combination of reason and emotion. So pag sinabi natin kasi na halimbawa, ninanais natin na magkaroon ng makatarungang mundo, we have a motivation to work toward a more just world. When we say that, our motivation for a more just world is as the intellectual side to it. We have an understanding of what a more just world looks like, but also we feel very strongly about it. There is an impulse, and the impulse is coming from strong emotion that we are angry at injustice, for instance, that we feel compassion for those who are victimized by injustice, and we have this strong attraction towards towards a situation or a state of affairs where those things don't happen anymore, or at least happen a lot less. Okay. Itong virtue involves reliable success. Hindi rin naman kasi matatawag na galing kung halimbawa palaging sablay yung attempt ng mismong tao na makuha kung ano yung mismong target. Okay, so dito sa susunod na column, ito na yung pagkakaiba ng moral and epistemic virtue. Tapos may kinalaman dito sa huling punto sa first column. So in the first place, and this is very important, there's a difference between telos or overall aim and scopos or immediate target. So yung telos, baka yung telos narinig nyo na kung ano ito. Yung telos, yun yung telos is connected to function or ultimate goal. So the ultimate goal in our moral life, the telos of our moral life, according to the Aristotelian framework, is eudaimonia. We want a kind of flourishing, happiness that is proper to human beings, and that is the happiness proper to human being is inclusive and communal. So the telos is a big overall aim, right? Yung scopos, immediate target. Okay? So ang ibig sabihin, halimbawa, ang overall aim natin ay magkaroon na makakamit yung eudaimonia para sa sarili natin at para sa komunidad natin. Yung scopos, para sa araw na ito, kailangan kong tugunan yung aking mga pananagutan. For example, I have this tendency to mismanage allocation of my time. So, ang immediate target ko, kailangan yung oras ko magkaroon ng sapat na ilalaan para dun sa task for the day na makakatulong sa akin at sa ibang tao. So, yun yung immediate target. So the scopus is narrow and very specific. And we can say that attaining the telos also means hitting the immediate target repeatedly. Pero pwede kasi na makamit pa rin natin yung telos na sumasablay tayo dito sa Scopus. Kung minsan nga, baka nga madalas sa simula, sablay tayo dito sa immediate target. Moral virtue is more directly focused on the telos or the overall aim. But for intellectual virtue, Scopus is very important. Scopus is very important. Kasi, matatawag natin na dito sa here in epistemology, the telos is to attain epistemic goods such as knowledge, propositional knowledge, knowledge by acquaintance, understanding. And that's a very big overall aim. Understanding the world, understanding ourselves, understanding human action, right? So that's a very big thing. And the scopus can be like, what am I supposed to believe about this particular event that's being reported in the news now? How am I supposed to process information that I'm getting from this particular reading? Right? So, ganun yung immediate target. Doon sa scopus, mataas din yung level of demandingness sa epistemology. Sa ethics, hindi ganun kataas yung standard. Right? So, ito yung huling punto ko dito sa slide na ito. In the epistemic domain, failure to attain truth in the short term would mean failure in doing an act of intellectual virtue. So ito yung natukoy natin doon sa nakaraang module. Kaya nga mahalaga yung scopus. Kasi ibig sabihin nito, pwedeng makamit pa rin yung telos ng pag-unawa at kaalaman para sa pangkalahatan, para sa mga tao sa lipunan. Pero pagka sumablay ako sa scopus, sa immediate target, sa one-shot thing, I failed to attain truth. And there's something false that got assimilated into my, I don't know, belief system. So it means there was a failure in doing an act of intellectual virtue. And this is not something that we can permit. Right? Kaya nga sinasabi na mas mataas yung level of demandingness ng epistemology sa usapin ng scopus o immediate target. Okay. So ito yung mahalagang punto na makukuha natin kay Robertson Wood now that we have a bit of a clear view on what their understanding of where they're taking virtue epistemology rather. So now we focus on their specific understanding of intellectual virtues. At its core, Robertson would propose an understanding of intellectual virtue that heavily features emotions. Pero meron silang particular na pag-unawa kung ano ibig sabihin ng emotion. Right? So in this slide, I have a picture of Daniel Cabrera. Yung batang to ay sumikat. Medyo matagal na siya. Palagi ko malaki na siya ngayon. Hindi na ganyan yung itsura niya. Pero sumikat siya kasi may kumuha ng picture niya sa labas ng isang McDonald's sa Cebu yata. Gumagawa siya ng homework. May parang makeshift na bangko na doon siya gumagawa ng homework sa labas sa McDo para maliwanag kasi homeless sila nung panahong yon at wala siyang source ng ilaw o liwanag para makapag-aral siya, right? So I think that story is inspirational for a lot of people because it's one thing to say, okay, I want to learn, I want to know things, I want to understand things. But when we see a person, in this case, a child, Daniel Cabrera, Daniel wants to learn, wants to know, wants to do well in school. Kasama niya, nag-aaral siya, na homework yung ginagawa niya. Pero sa harap ng malaking paghihirap, yung ibang tao hindi problema na magkaroon sila ng desk kung saan pwede sila mag-aral na may maliwanag doon at merong mga gamit, may papel, may lapis, etc. Pero para sa kanya, hindi ganun kadali. Pero makikita natin na mas matingkad yung kanyang emotional commitment at motivation doon sa na matuto siya. Right? So, here, in Robertson Wood's book, they draw attention to the importance of emotional responses in epistemology. And they focus on a particular intellectual virtue that I think is something that only they focus on a lot, or at least they're one of the first to focus on that, and that intellectual virtue is love of knowledge, right? So, maaari natin makita kay Daniel Cabrera ang love of knowledge kasi yung kanyang pagnanasa na matuto siya, na malaman niya kung ano yung tama, ginagawa niya kahit hindi madali para sa kanya, right? So this is the kind of thing that could develop into intellectual virtue. Masasabi ba natin na intellectually virtuous si Daniel Cabrera? Ang mas tamang sabihin, masasabi natin that he's on the way to becoming intellectually virtuous. That depends on what he does with his motivation to learn and to do well in school later. Is that directed towards greater understanding, or is that directed towards something else? So this is something, we are not condemning him, of course, but we are saying that this commitment to intellectual virtue is a lifelong process, and that demands like a longer term assessment of where the decisions and the emotional responses took a person, right? Okay. So meron akong, so we're talking about epistemology and emotions, which is the reason why I have this picture from the movie Inside Out, because this is the movie where we see the emotions, and we see the basic emotions. Kaya yung five basic emotions, there's a scientific basis for this. These are the five emotions that are observed in virtually all cultures, and they seem to be like the building blocks for other more complex things. So we have joy, we have sadness, we have fear, we have anger, and we have disgust, right? So the interesting point that Robertson would make is that emotions play a role in understanding, and emotions play a role in knowledge by acquaintance. And it may even be said that certain forms of propositional knowledge without an emotional component misses something important. Kung meron kang propositional knowledge, something that can be boiled down to a single declarative sentence, and maybe you can even create variables out of that. Pagka wala yung pag may nawawalang emotional component, masasabi natin na may kulang. Hindi lang may kulang dun sa tao, there's something epistemologically important that's missing, right? Earlier for the Daniel Cabrera story, I was already implying this, which is that emotions can be felt while gaining knowledge by acquaintance and even propositional knowledge. Mamaya meron akong particular na halimbawa na may kinalaman pa rin sa Inside Out, right? But before we go to that example, we have this definition of emotion from Roberts. So si Robert Roberts, bago siya nakipag-collaborate kay Wood para isulat itong intellectual virtues na libro, meron siyang mga isinulat tungkol sa emotion. At saka ito yung formulaic definition niya na emotion. For Roberts, an emotion is a concern-based construal, right? So concern implies a certain value, or a certain or interest in something of value, and construal refers to the way something is framed. So construal means the way you see something. Do you see it as something threatening? Do you see it something that you should be afraid of? So ang punto dito, the acquisition of knowledge and the way that we acquire knowledge is infused by emotion. So if that's beginning to be like puzzling or even weird, let me just clarify by giving this example. So ito yung ito pa rin yung definition, di ba? An emotion is a concern-based construal. So here we have a picture of the main character in Inside Out, si Riley, and she sees a spider right in front of her nose, right? So may simpleng propositional knowledge dyan. There is a spider in front of my nose. Yun yung propositional knowledge para dun sa mismong knower, para dun sa mismong agent. But this is not cold and emotionless. This is coded and absorbed by her in a way that is infused by fear. Right? So fear yung emotion response. Hindi ito parang neutral na parang robot siya na parang yung brain niya is something like blank computer screen na parang may magta-type na thoughts doon na parang spider in front of my nose. Here, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. The way it works is that she sees the spider in front of her, so there are messages from her visual cortex, from her eyes going to her brain, but also there's a very strong emotional response connected to fear, because we as humans have evolved to fear spiders because some of them are poisonous, they can kill us, etc. I'm not going to go into the long evolutionary story just now, pero ito makikita natin na hindi bloodless or emotionless or completely cold yung encoding of information from the environment. Right? This is something that we have been giving examples of since the beginning of the semester. So examples such as you look out the window and you see, is it dark? Is it raining? Etc. Usually, or for the most part, we have not paid attention to the emotion-based, the emotional component to that. But according to Robertson Wood, this is something very important. So here, the knower construes the presence of a spider in front of her as something that she sees it as something that should cause her concern. So this is probably going to be followed by her shouting, screaming, and moving away from the spider or swatting it with her notebook. Kasi hindi lang simpleng robotic encoding ng information nga yung nangyayari. So ang punto ni Robertson Wood, ganito tayo kumilos sa mundo. Ganito nangyayari nagkakaroon tayo ng kaalaman tungkol sa anong nangyayari sa paligid natin. So pagka pinag-usapan natin yung galing sa epistemology, when we talk about intellectual virtue, kailangan the virtue is informed by how emotions work, right? Which is why we're going to talk a lot about emotions beginning this week. Okay, so pagtuunan natin ng pansin itong love of knowledge, which is a very critical intellectual virtue according to Robertson Wood. So love of knowledge, so I'm going to go over this quickly because I have so many other things that I should discuss in this recording. So I will begin with this last point in the slide, which is that love of knowledge is directed toward attaining epistemic goods. Lahat ng tao ipinanganak na merong inclination. All human beings are born with the inclination to curiosity. That is a very natural tendency in everyone, and we see that very clearly in kids. Kahit na even when we talk about infants with no ability to speak a lot of words yet, so 1-year-old, 2-year-old, pag may nakita silang bago, o pag may narinig silang bago, makikita mo talaga yung nalalaki yung mata nung bata kasi parang ano yun? Ano nangyayari? Ano yan? Ngayon ako nakakita ng ganyan. So we all have this natural tendency to be curious and to be impressed by things that we see and hear and smell that are completely new. Right? Kaya nga the first line of Aristotle's and the first line of Aristotle's Metaphysics reads like this: all human beings by nature yearn towards knowledge. At least that's how one translator puts the first line of the Metaphysics in English. All human beings by nature desire to know. So natural na yun eh. Isinilang tayo na meron ng ganong curiosity, meron ng ganong inclination towards knowledge. Pero paano tumutubo at paano nabubuo yung curiosity na yun. Pwede kasi na itong desire to know ay hindi lumago. And sometimes, speaking about children, that happens because children become very annoying with their questions, or at least annoying to adults. So napakarami lang tanong, ang hirap sagutin. Tapos, when children are very young and they are not yet exposed to like cynicism and people making fun of them for asking questions, they just don't stop. They don't stop trying to discover, trying to ask, trying to find out, right? But after a while, because of the responses of people around them, it's possible that the child begins to not ask questions anymore. Nahiya ako, baka mapagalitan ako, baka mapagsabihan ako, baka mapagtawanan ako. Pwede naman din na yung love of knowledge, desire to know, ay mapunta sa mga bagay na hindi kanais-nais. So palagi ko yung pagiging chismosa, it's a love of knowledge that's become perverted. So kasi ang tanong dito, yes, we have your curiosity towards what's happening around us and what's happening in the world and how things work, but what do we make of that? How do we shape that emotion as we mature? Sometimes the way that emotion is shaped is not done by us, it's done by people around us. But as we grow older, we ourselves make the decisions. What do we do with our curiosity? What are the things that we are naturally curious about, but maybe we say, okay, I'm very curious about that, but I'm not going to ask this other person or this new friend that I met because it is invasive. Hindi ko siya pipilitin na magbahagi sa akin. So may curiosity ako, pero yun nakikita mo yung interaction between the will and desire. So I have this desire to know, I have this judgment whether the desire is appropriate, and I make a decision about what to do with that. So that leads to possibility that this impulse to curiosity and to figuring things out can mature into love of knowledge and attaining understanding of things that are important and not of the things that are like gossipy or like petty or private. That's really none of our business. Okay? Kasi hindi naman ibig sabihin itong love of knowledge. This is not license for us to pry into people's lives when it's none of our business. Okay. So, intellectual virtues, ito yung definition of virtue ni Robertson Wood. It's an acquired base of excellent epistemic functioning. Right? So, ito, nabigay ko na yung halimbawa nito. People assess the objects of their urges and desires and attractions for their eligibility and then choose what to do. Nakapagbigay na ako ng halimbawa yan Halimbawa, meron kang bagong kaibigan, tapos meron siyang kinuwento sa'yo, parang organic naman, siya mismo yung nagkwento. Tapos nagkaroon ka ng curiosity tungkol sa pribado niyang buhay. Tapos kahit na mataas yung level of curiosity mo, pwede mo sabihin, teka muna, parang masyadong invasive yun. Hindi ko muna tatanungin. Kung mag-share siya mamaya, baka pwedeng magtanong pa ako. Pero kung huminto na siya sa pagkukwento niya ngayon, hindi ako dapat na alamin yun. Kasi baka hindi pa siya handa na magbahagi or baka private yun. Right? So, people often have conflicting desires and they may judge some of them desires to be inappropriate or inopportune or just plain bad. The capacity to choose is also a function of the will. So, itong nakikita natin, may kinalaman yung pagpili natin doon sa mga bagay na nararamdaman natin. So, our capacity to choose is related to the things that we feel, are related to the things that we have an emotional response to. Right? Kaya nga, mahalaga dito yung will as impulse management. Let me just manage my slides a bit because I think I might run out of time for this recording, but I'm just going to also make sure that some of the things are going to be covered in our classroom session when we next meet. Okay. So, for one thing, when we talk about the will or the capacity to choose, we're talking about impulse management or self-control, which is why I have this picture. So on page 63 of Roberts and Wood's book, they say, mature people engage in impulse management. They become wise about their emotions and their appetites and their desires, and through self-management practices and efforts and the strengths that accrue from these, they come to be able to suppress unwanted behaviors and actions to extinguish or modify unwanted deliverances of their wills. So, natututunan din naman natin ito na maging maayos yung ating tugon doon sa ating mga nararamdaman. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na binibigyan natin ng halaga yung pakiramdam na sasabihin natin lahat ng nararamdaman natin pagbibigyan lang natin, at lahat ng nararamdaman natin gagawin lang natin. Pag feel mo, gawin mo. Ang problema doon, kahit na iisang tao sa iisang sandali ng kanyang buhay, yung mga bagay na feel niya ay hindi isa lang. So we also have this interest in impulse management because at any given moment, we have more than one impulse. More often than not, those impulses lead us in two very, very different directions. And part of our ability to choose consists in determining which impulse do I go with and why. Right? So this is also something that we pay attention to when we cultivate intellectual virtue. Right? Ang sinasabi kasi dito ni Robertson Wood, the what we choose, our will, is also a source of emotions. Ito yung punto nila na medyo mahirap maintindihan o hindi ganun kadaling maintindihan na kailangan natin pagtuunan ng pansin. So, tandaan nyo itong puntong ito. They say that the will is a source of emotions, and I'm going to say a few things about this now, but we are going to discuss it more extensively in our classroom sessions. Right? So, we make decisions on how we see the world and how we see things. Halimbawa, minsan halimbawa, may isang tao nagreklamo o may isang taong nagsabi ng isang bagay na kapintasan. Halimbawa, pinintasan yung pamamalakad ng gobyerno. Pwede yang tignan bilang napaka ano mo naman, reklamador mo na lang naman, palagi ka na lang oposisyon. Bakit palagi mo yung sinasabi? So that is a way of framing something that comes with an emotional response. That is a source of emotion. That the emotion is annoyance or irritation or even anger directed towards something who is expressing a certain view. So what we choose as patterns of responses become a source of emotions also. And all that affect the way we form and acquire beliefs, right? And the way that we end up understanding the world. So, ito yung punto na sinasabi nila. Kaya nga may picture dito ng duck rabbit. This is the famous duck rabbit that in philosophy, Wittgenstein is one of the philosophers who's very famous for talking about this. Ito yung imahen para sa a phrase na seeing as. So if you look at the drawing facing in this direction, you can see it as a rabbit. But if you look at it facing that other direction, you can see it as a duck. Ito yung sinasabing construal. One thing, one input, one image in the slide or in the recording that you are looking at, that you can see it as, you can construe it as at least two different things. More often than not, reality can be construed or framed or seen as two or more different things. And Robertson Wood's point is that becomes a source of emotions, and those emotions infuse and affect the way that we form beliefs and the way that we end up understanding the world. So ito yung mahalagang punto nila. So dito na tayo sa sunod na issue. Okay. So there is a point of disagreement here between Robertson Wood on the one hand and Thomas Aquinas on the other. And why is this important? This is important because Robertson would want to establish that the will, and especially the will as it is related to emotions, is essential for intellectual virtue. Kaya may isang mahalagang pilosopo, si Thomas Aquinas ngayon, sinasabi niya, hindi ganon. Right? So, and Robertson would have this extended discussion in the chapter that you're supposed to read. They debate with Aquinas, and I'm going to leave you to read that part where they engage with Aquinas, but I'm going to talk about a piece of evidence that is on Robertson, that supports Robertson Wood's position. And it is also something that they unfortunately do not explain as extensively in the chapter, which is why I'm going to cover the gaps by explaining things in this recording. So ito rin yung dahilan ko ba't nagmamadali ako, kasi kailangan nating madaanan itong ebidensyang ito. Okay. So in the next few slides are going to be a different color, just to signal that I'm talking about this particular piece of evidence that Robertson would wield again in their effort to show that Aquinas is wrong about something. Okay, so the point is about the connection. The point is about the essential connection between the emotions on the one hand and the will. Right? So ito yung punto na kailangan ni Robertson Wood, and I think it is also something that was established more recently, and it's something that we have to accept. I think for myself, I think that the essential connection between emotions and the will is just a fact that surprisingly people were not aware of in a very clear way for a long time. May isang sikat na libro, medyo luma na rin ito. I think it's more than 50 years old. It's called Descartes' Error, and a lot of philosophers have taken issue with the title of the book because they allege, and maybe they rightly allege, that Damasio, who is a neurologist and is in brain research, misunderstood Descartes. Pero kahit na sabi natin, okay, hindi tama yung reading ni Damasio and Descartes, di naman siya Descartes scholar, di naman siya philosopher, okay. Pero ang punto kasi, yung Cartesian emphasis sa pangangatwiran. So the Cartesian emphasis on reason and the capacity of reason to grasp reality and help us attain understanding is the point that Damasio wants to expose as wrong-headed. So mali yun, hindi gatwiran, right? So Damasio's work demonstrates that the absence of emotion and feeling can break down rationality, right? So rationality, meaning wise decision making, depends not on reason but on emotions. Yun yung idea. So rational and wise decision making depends on emotions, or we can even say rational and wise decision making more heavily depends on emotions, right? So that's the idea. And how does Damasio establish that? He establishes that by showing or by discussing two related cases, right? So the first case is old. It comes from 1848. Right? So this man who is in the picture, his name is Phineas Gage. So in 1848, he was working as a foreman at railroad construction in Vermont. May ginagawa sila doon na release ng tren yung ginagawa nila. Tapos meron silang ginagawang controlled explosion. Ginagamit nila itong bagay na ito. It's an iron rod. So they put I think gunpowder, and they pump it or they press it down, and they do certain things. So mahalagang sequence ng paglalagay ng gunpowder at saka yung pag-pump down. Merong tamang sequence para yung explosion pumunta pa ilalim, pa loob ng lupa. Tapos ibabaon nila yung kung ano mang mga kailangan ilagay doon para mailatag nga yung release. Ngayon, isang beses, nagkamali si Phineas Gage doon sa ginagawa nilang controlled explosion. Kaya itong iron rod na ito, hindi nagkaroon ng explosion, syempre, pero hindi papunta sa loob, pababa yung explosion, pataas yung nangyari. So yung iron rod, so nakatungo yung ulo nila doon sa ginagawa nila. Ang nangyari, itong iron rod na ito ay lumipad at tumama sa ulo niya. So it was a freak accident that caused an iron rod to pass through his head. Hindi siya namatay. Ganito yung nangyaring trajectory. So napakabilis, no? So dumaan yung iron rod sa ulo niya. Ito yung mismong skull ni Phineas Gage na preserve ng mga doktor kasi napaka-interesting kaso siya. So pumasok yung iron rod dito sa baba. Pasensya na sa graphic description, sa ilalim ng sa ilalim ng isang eye socket, tsaka lumabas dito sa ibabaw ng skull. So it injured the part of the brain that is here. So we now know that this is the prefrontal cortex. It's the part of your brain that is just above your eyebrows. So sa itaas ng kilay. Ayan din yung bahagi ng utak ng tao na mas prominente sa tao kumpara sa mga hindi tao kagaya ng chimpanzee at gorilla. So our higher functionings are connected to the prefrontal cortex. And Phineas Gage got permanent damage in that part of his brain. Tapos undeveloped pa yung medisina noon kasi 1848 nga. Ang nangyari kay Phineas Gage ay nasira yung buhay niya pagkatapos ng aksidenteng ito dahil nawala yung kanyang impulse control, emotional regulation, rational and wise decision making. Nawala lahat yon. So dati foreman siya, tapos mukhang up and coming, parang upward trajectory, mapopromote siya sa posisyon na mas mataas pa ng foreman, responsableng tao, pinagkakatiwalaan ng mga kinauukulan, pwedeng magkaroon ng mas mataas pa na pwesto, mas importante pang trabaho, lahat yon nawala. Hindi na siya pwedeng magtrabaho kahit na yung mas mababa pa sa trabaho niya dati bilang foreman, hindi niya kaya. Because he cannot make decisions properly, both big ones and small ones. And even very small ones, he cannot make decisions about them. So, and he started having problems with controlling what he says. So yung impulse control as basic as you must not say bad things in front of certain people at certain times because that's bad for them and that's bad for you. Nawala yun lahat. Right? So Phineas Gage is an interesting case that shows us about a certain function in the human brain that's connected to decision making and impulse control. Ang kailangan natin makita, ang connection noong bahagi ng utak na yon at sa emotions. So dito natin makikita yung pasyente ni Damasio. Si Antonio Damasio, meron siyang isang pasyente na nagkaroon ng similar brain injury. Of course, to preserve the privacy of this patient, binigyan lang siya ng alias. So we don't really know who this patient is. And Damasio just gives him this name, Elliot. Alias Elliot. Si Elliot, ganun din yung bahagi ng brain na nagkaroon siya ng injury dito sa prefrontal cortex. I think what happened to Elliot was that he had a tumor close to his sinuses. So that was pressing on nandun sa sinus area, and then yung tumor, and then pressing into the brain. So pataas yung tubo ng tumor and pressing into his prefrontal cortex. And the doctors had to operate on the tumor and remove it. And the tumor was very successfully removed. But in the process of removing the tumor, parts of Elliot's prefrontal cortex were damaged. So itong bahagi na nakikita natin din sa scan, itong green part, ito yung nabawasan itong area ng brain niya na to, parang na-scrape kasi kinailangan gawin para doon sa tumor removal, right? So before the operation and before any of this happened, Elliot was a good husband and father. He had a good job in a business firm. He's like Phineas Gage. He had an important role in his community. So he was a good role model for his younger siblings and colleagues. he had attained a high level of personal and professional success. Meron siyang mataas na social status. A lot of people respected him. So he was an upstanding member of the professional community. He was loved by his wife, and he was a stable influence on his young children, etc. But his life unraveled after the doctors removed the tumor I was talking about. So ano nangyari kay Elliot? Etong slide na ito, makikita natin what Elliot lost and what Elliot retained. Noong umpisa, hindi sila naniniwala na parang may kinalaman dun sa damage sa prefrontal cortex yung nangyari sa buhay ni Elliot. Kasi, so just now I was describing his successful and very stable life. After his surgery, he lost all that. He lost his job, his marriage fell apart, his relationship with his children just unraveled, and then he was unable to keep down a job. A lot of people lost respect for him, so nawala na yung role niya sa kanyang social networks. And then he began to make bad decisions based on associating with people who were criminals, essentially mga people who try to pull cons. So pag sinukat yung capacity ni Elliot, his IQ is fine and general intelligence. Physical and perceptual ability are also fine. So wala nangyari na parang hindi niya makontrol yung left hand niya or right hand niya, or may hindi siya nakikita, or spatial perception, hindi siya makapagmaneho ng kotse. Walang ganon. Ability to access knowledge base and memory. Hindi rin, so kung ano yung natapos niyang kurso sa college, kung ano yung mga kaso at saka mga spreadsheets at kung mga detalye tungkol sa mga proyekto sa trabaho na alam niya, hindi nawala yun. Yung lahat ng alam niya nandun pa rin. Yung lahat ng alaala niya nandun. Hindi rin nawala itong linguistic ability and logical competence. All these can be tested by neurologists and psychologists, and he was attested for all this. So everything he passed with flying colors. So what he used to have before, IQ, general intelligence, ability to access knowledge, everything was intact, right? But everything on this column, he lost. So nawala yung kanyang emotional response. Nawala rin yung kanyang ability to make decisions. Yung ability to make big decisions, and also even small decisions like, I am working on this spreadsheet. It's going to be finished in 10 minutes. Malapit na ako matapos, pero bigla ko naisipan, tatawagan ko itong taong to. Tatapusin ko ba muna o tatawagan ko? That's something that tatawagan ko yung taong naisip ko. That seems to be something that caused him to completely break down. And he was unable to make decisions, or he made really bad ones. So he also lost the ability to follow through and finish a task. Kagaya nga yung sinabi ko, will he finish the spreadsheet if it's going to be done in 10 minutes, or will he call the other person? So maybe he calls the person he thinks about, and then he's unable to go back to the task that's important, right? So nawala rin itong kanyang susceptibility to good advice and judicious admonition. Hindi na rin siya nakikinig sa mga sinasabi ng tao sa paligid niya na wala sa ayos yung ginawa mo. Bakit naman ganon? Wag mong gawin yan. So, kung dati meron siyang kakayahang kumilatis na matino yung payo na dumarating at kailangan niya sundin, nawala rin yung lahat. Hindi niya rin kayang sundin yung mga payo. Kaya nga nawalan siya ng trabaho at saka nag-breakdown yung kanyang marriage. And he also lost his ability to learn from mistakes committed. So he lost a lot. Pero there is an appearance that his knowledge acquiring capacities are there. Diba? Kasi IQ, physical ability, memory. So ang sinasabi ni Robertson Wood, pag nawala itong ating emotion, susunod-sunod, mawawala itong ating ability to make wise choices. Right? So this is Damasio's conclusion in his discussion of Elliot in his book. Damasio says, I realized that I had been overly concerned with the state of Elliot's intelligence and had not paid much attention to his emotions. On a more probing analysis, something was missing. Elliot was able to recount the tragedy of his life with a detachment that was out of step with the magnitude of the events. Nowhere was there a sense of his own suffering. He was calm. He was relaxed. His narratives flowed effortlessly. He was not hushing inner turmoil. He simply did not have any turmoil to hush. This was not a culturally acquired stiff upper lip. In some curious way, he was not pained by his tragedy. I found myself suffering more when listening to Eliot's stories than Eliot himself. So ito yung nawala yung parang yung sinasabi ko kanina na may processing ng information. We remember Riley seeing the spider in front of her nose. So there's a spider in front of her of my nose. And we have an expression of that proposition that is infused with the emotion. And in this case, the emotion is fear. And the emotion is of the right magnitude. Tama yung level, mataas pero hindi masyadong mataas, etc. And then, nandun yung tamang response. Lalayaan ko yung spider or papatayin ko yung spider kasi baka mamaya poison yung spider yan, etc. So ito, kay Eliot, ganun din yung nawala. So he's able to process and express certain things like, I lost my job, I lost my position in my professional community, my marriage fell apart. And then he just recites all that without the appropriate emotional response. And the point seems to be that without that appropriate emotional response, if he feels how serious it is that he lost what he lost, that's a motivation for choosing something else. So doon ang gagaling yung kakayahang pumili. Halimbawa, masakit sa kanya. Nakita niya, napakaraming nawala sa akin. Napakalaki nung trahedyang nangyari sa akin. Kaya kung mararamdaman niya at an emotional level, at a deep emotional level, what that means, that can translate if he chooses to, that translates to his being able to choose a different kind of path than the one he was going down on, right? But he was apparently unable to do that because in this case, it's not like sheer willpower na coming from the spirit. His brain is injured. Right? So a specific brain injury affects a person's ability to feel emotions, and by virtue of that, by losing an ability to have the right magnitude of emotional responses to something, he's unable to choose well. Right? So ano yung conclusion ni Robertson Wood? Their conclusion is that the will is an epistemic faculty. Our capacity to choose is a power or a faculty that allows us to gain epistemic goods such as knowledge and understanding, right? So in the coming days and weeks, we will discuss the will as epistemic faculty, something that enables us to harness our skills, talents, and faculties for the purpose of attaining knowledge and attaining and going for epistemic goods. Right? So sa puntong ito, syempre yung ebidensya ng Phineas Gage saka ni Damasio, hindi yun available kay Aquinas. Pero sa palagay ko, yun ang pinakamahalagang paglalatag na sasabihin na intellectual virtues, 1, involve emotion, 2, require engagement of the will. So those things are very important. So make sure to read the chapter closely. And you can, of course, go back to this recording as you need. So that's it for now.